get to be a wise folk, you realize you can't know it all. We're all in this together. So let's have a conversation about issues related to the third stage of life. I'm Kathy Holmes from Nanaimo Family Life and your host for Wise Folks. If you're a wise folk or know someone who is, tune in Mondays at 1 o'clock for Wise Folks. And we're at the top of the hour. It is Monday again. The sun is shining. Thank goodness, thank goodness, thank goodness. Thanks for listening. Once again, I'm Kathy Holmes. I'm your host for Wise Folks. Wise Folks is a collaboration between Nanaimo Family Life Association and all of the incredible wise folks that we have in Nanaimo. You're listening to 101.7 FM Nanaimo. And in the booth with me today, I have something really special to share with you in regards to mediation. Mediation is not always something that people are open to doing. Arguments happen, stuff happens, but we have an expert, and that's Claudia Brann. Thanks, Claudia, for coming in today. And we're going to talk about the ins and outs of mediation. So welcome to the show. Hey, Claudia, thanks for coming.
Thanks, Kathy. Good to be here.
I'm really glad that you came because you know what? Sometimes for people at this time of year, out goes the winter, in comes the in comes the spring. And with that come, for some people, lots of different obstacles. And sometimes family dynamics and people thinking about moving, thinking about, realigning themselves in one way or another with something that was important to them. So arguments happen, issues begin to surface. So tell us a little about, first of all, what is mediation? Why is it so important for people to consider?
Well, you're right. Disputes and conflict often come through change. When things change, when it's a different season, an older person walks outside and falls, that's something that changes. Yeah. When people decide that their situation is something they want to make different, that's when other people get threatened by that or feel uncomfortable with it, and that's when conflict can arise. Mm-hmm. And the work I do is around family mediation, and my specialty is around elder mediation. So mediation is a process that people can use to work around disputes, to work around conflict, to have a conversation together, to look at what's really happening and what the underlying issues are for the conflict.
Absolutely. And conflict in itself can be multidimensional, right?
Certainly.
And it could also be at times, they say that, you can't have conflict without two people actually being engaged in the conflict. But nonetheless, sometimes people carry around intensive baggage. They hold on to it for a long period of time, and they don't necessarily realize how hurt that they are until something happens. And then when that happens, the conflict really arises. And the other person can very often say, well, how'd that happen?
Yeah, that's
you know
right.
what I mean?
Yeah, you're talking about triggers that make people react in a way that's way beyond what the other person thinks is a natural response to what's happening. And it happens in families often because we get reminded by our sibling of issues that happened in our childhood.
Yes.
Once again, my older sister is telling me what to do.
Yes.
And I know better what's for mum, and she is trying to tell me what to do again. Those old patterns of behavior come up all the time.
Yes. Yes. When you say trigger for the audience, I know that most of our audience would probably understand the basics behind what a trigger is, but can we explore types of triggers? What you did mention, something from, family of origin where there were two sisters or two brothers or something like that, where there was a sibling rivalry of sorts. But what other kinds of things are considered to be triggers for people?
Oh, triggers are very personal. Triggers are anything that reminds you of a situation before that didn't turn out well. Yeah. It can be you can have positive triggers, but more often we see them as negative triggers, and they put us in a place that we were in that previous conflict. Yes. So the emotions from that conflict compound what we're feeling immediately. And that can really make it difficult to tease out what our reaction to right now is and what our reaction is to what happened before. Mm-hmm. And it can be confusing in the moment, and the emotions can drive the conflict. And the other person is stunned sometimes by the response. Mm-hmm. And it can go the wrong way.
Yes.
And that taking a breath when that happens for both parties can sometimes change it. In mediation, some of those triggers are brought on by what's happening, and the mediator can help the conversation to go forward. So sometimes those conversations happen in families at home and they're not finished. Somebody storms off, things are said, people are hurt, and the conversation isn't finished. In mediation, we can work towards finishing that conversation. So really understanding the complexity of what's compounded it, of what's previously driven that conflict.
And conflict in itself, a lot of people have different ways, I think, for coping in conflict. For some people, they just shut down. They refuse to engage. For other people, they're like bulls with a red flag in front, and they just keep hammering and hammering until they're getting what they want, and they want to be right fighters as opposed to being what may be considered to be fair for the situation or intelligent in the way that they deliver their information. Gets lost sometimes in all of that emotion. So from a mediating point of view, I think that there may be somewhat of a misconception. I'm assuming a lot. I don't know, but because my job is to like uncover what a potential obstacle would be. For some people, mediation means, you've got two people that are super, super angry with each other, and the mediator's going to choose a side. And that's just not true, is it?
Well, that's a red flag to me, of course, because mediators are impartial. Yeah. They are working for both the parties, and they are not working for one person or taking sides. They're completely unbiased. Now, even by being in a situation, in a room with 2 people or 10 people in conflict, changes the situation. So mediators have to recognize that their presence actually changes the situation. However, the important thing is that the parties there all feel that they're well represented, that they're there voluntarily, that at the beginning of the mediation you talk about confidentiality, about how people want the information, both of the process in mediation and any decisions made, how you want that as a group outside of the room, or whether this is something that stays in the room. So all those pieces, a professional mediator knows how to manage that conversation. And there's 2 pieces of managing the process, of managing how the conversation goes, of managing when someone flies off the handle or feels that a trigger has made their response overwhelming to the situation. So a mediator can help manage that and to move the conversation forward so it becomes a productive conversation and people are left feeling they understand better. They understand the context of where these emotions are coming from.
So for someone who is thinking toward the lines of wanting to find solution for an issue, because we know that certainly meditation, mediation, well, it is a bit of meditation in its own way, but mediation, a lot of people are, you think about divorcing couples or family dynamics or things like that, where people are ready to just, they're going to slice away that part of their life and put it aside, and will often go to the lawyers way before they need to go. Causing very expensive and drastic measures. Mediation allows what?
It allows people to face the conversation instead of the conversation being had through other people, whether it's lawyers or other family members, whoever it is, instead of that conversation being hearsay or being an assumed conversation, it can be a conversation they directly have, and that can change it. When people sit down and talk about an issue, they can understand that conflict isn't always a bad thing. Conflict can really change a situation that you've been coping in or been unhappy in but not able to voice that unhappiness. It can change it to a more positive situation.
So if you are a person that really dislikes conflict and you tend to be someone who's more of a runner, someone who's it's just easy just to call it and walk away, you're really doing a disservice to the entire situation, aren't you?
yes, you are, in that you're not going to change anything by
Yeah.
running away. That hurt or that unresolved conversation that you had with that person is going to stay with you, and it's going to come up again. And we talked of triggers. If you've had that, then if it occurs again in your life, it'll compound from that previous experience.
Yeah.
So we all know that talking therapies and having that openness around issues can change them. And it takes work, it takes courage, it takes people wanting to do it, and that's why mediation has to be voluntary. Nobody comes to mediation unless they're ready for it.
Yeah. And it's different than counseling.
It's different from counselling in that it's dealing with what's in front of them now. The unresolved pieces from previously, we're not going to work with that in mediation. We're going to work with the feelings that it brings to the conflict today, but I'm not going to work with people's childhood issues with them. We might work together on how that affects what they're doing today, and they may come to the conclusion that counselling is where they need to take that piece. But working with the conflict with the one person or other people in the room is how we work together in mediation.
So you've been doing this for some period now. How long have you been doing mediation?
I did conflict resolution training at Carleton University 8 years ago, and I set up my practice then in Ottawa, and then I came to the islands 3 years ago.
So you're new to the Vancouver Island.
Yeah. I'm new to this area.
Absolutely.
And the practice I had in Ontario was both family mediation, so around divorce and child separation agreements. And my work now is mainly around elder mediation. And that's where I feel the pull. I feel a real interest in working with families around issues that affect older people and families that are struggling with them. And these issues there are a variety of issues. They can be from residential issues, so deciding how they're going to make a change to a different residence.
Absolutely.
How families are going to make the decisions around that. And some situations are where all the siblings agree on how a situation might be moved forward, and they don't know how to approach the parents. And sometimes the siblings don't agree, and the parents are struggling with that. And it's very, very troubling to parents to have their children disagreeing, especially when it's around care or a relationship with the parents.
And we talked earlier about triggers, the idea for some that if, for example, and just out of nowhere, this is not something that's real. I'm making it up for just as a disclaimer to, the world out there. But let's say you have a sister living in Ottawa, and you have one in New Westminster, and you have one on Vancouver Island, and mom lives on the mainland, right? Yeah. And the sister that's living in New Westminster is doing everything for parents, everything. They're doing the shopping, the transportation, the assistance to get family to the medical appointment, and all of that. And the caregiver burnout that sibling is experiencing is significant. And so she gets a call from Ontario, from, her, let's say her older sister. I don't know. Again, I'm making this up as I go along, but
you're doing well.
I'm thinking it's a typical situation, and certainly what we've seen through Nanaimo family life, that these are typical issues that come through. But, the Ontario daughter figures that she can micromanage from an Ontario perspective while the person is on the ground here. The person on the island, the daughter on the island, it's possible to get across the ferry. It's possible to go, but due to personal work or whatever that person is doing, can't get it across. And so conflict begins, right? Mom and dad are really struggling. They're trying to do their best to appease all three daughters. There's backbiting going on. There's disagreement going on. And so finally they want to create a solution. What is your first point of call? What do you do?
Well, I mean, what you described, Kathy, is a very common situation. Our families are spread out over the country, and often there is one or two siblings who are close to the parents who are managing the situation and sometimes feeling resentment, sometimes feeling incredible pressure and stress over that. People are often in their young family life then as well, and we all know how busy that is.
Oh, for sure. I didn't even add that to the dynamic because it's true.
We call that the sandwich generation.
Absolutely.
So the family are struggling, and it may be that the family doctor or a member of the family, somebody sees that there is a situation here that they need to sit down and talk about, and they may know of elder mediation and contact someone. So a lot of my referrals are through family doctors, sometimes through lawyers, sometimes through people in the community who see this struggle going on, a financier or someone who may have met with the mother and heard about the struggle. I've had referrals through lines in shopping malls where people have been talking and they've talked to me, and we've had a discussion, and referrals have come through that about a neighbor who is struggling, and the family are all bickering about how things could be resolved. So the referral could come through either through the family or through somebody else.
Absolutely.
And the first initial conversation I'll have with the family is often a conference call with the family, with as many people as are able or willing to talk at that point. And in that conversation, we'll talk very little about the actual dispute, because I haven't got everybody in the room at that time, and I don't want to begin biasing my position or their positions in talking about the situation. So getting the bare bones of the situation, and that situation may be that mother is wanting to move, doesn't know how to move. The children are fussing about where she should be. The sister in Ontario may be saying she should move there. Different things can come up. So we talk about the basics of the situation and talk about what mediation is and what mediation isn't. What mediation is about the voluntary, is about the confidential, is bringing people together. And sometimes people are Skyped into mediation. I've had calls where we've had two relatives Skyped in, and they can hear the immediacy of the conversation. They can understand the emotions that are being felt by people through that conversation, and they can be involved in this conversation. They are talking and being part of it. So distance isn't a barrier.
Right.
So the initial conversation is about who would like to come and who may come and how they may organize that to be a mediation where we physically come together, whoever can, and the others are Skyped in. So the initial conversation happens, and then they go away and talk about it or think about it, and then we can set up a mediation if that's the way they choose to go forward. And that's one of the other big pieces, big advantages of mediation, is that it can happen quickly.
Yes.
I can pull a mediation together in 5 to 10 days if everyone is ready.
Well, I think that there's a lot to explore with mediation for families in the older generation. I think that people, once hearing and understanding that it isn't about blame or about extending an issue so that it's more challenging or more difficult, but rather that it's a solution base to try to find ways that everyone is heard, and then from once they're heard, then you can continue to create solution. We're going to take a quick break in conversation. We're with Claudia Brann. It says Brann, but it's Brann. And her company is called Symmetry, right?
Symmetry Mediation.
Symmetry Mediation. First day with my new eyes. I'm learning how to read as we speak. In the booth, as far as music for our musical break is concerned, once again, I have a beautiful album cover in front of me for which I really don't know an awful lot about. I don't believe I've played it before. The album is entitled Terminal Nostalgia, and I just think it was so fitting for today's show. The artist Ruben Hollybon, and I asked Claudia if she'd be so kind to pick out a tune, and she chose Common Table, which personally I think fits this like to the blitz. Enjoy.
Somewhere it's all been made up. I'll take a boat and take to the water in the future. When most of us is gone, I'll take a boat and head out through the somewhere in the future, where the devil is suddenly not. I'll take a boat and head out through the water in the future, where together we stand apart. I'll take my body and I'll weep it into stone when it's all been made up and the dust is laid up. We'll take a boat and start it all again to the water, to the water, to the water, to the water.
And we're back. I'm feeling that. I'm feeling that music. It's sort of radiating through me. If you could see the front of the cover of Terminal Nostalgia, it looks like a moving ocean, and at the same time, it also looks like there's a bunch of heads kind of popping up all over the bottom. I don't know if you can see that from that, but they're stones, obviously.
I think they are. They're stones on the shore.
They're stones on the shore, but they kind of give this resemblance of...
Right. It looks like a Norfolk coast to me.
Norfolk coast. And you're from England, aren't you?
I'm from England originally.
Yes.
And that's where he looks like it says he's from Norfolk, which is the east coast of England.
So my former husband was from Southport.
Okay.
And so I, in relation to London, where does that fit on the map for where you were from?
I was from Hertfordshire. So that's just north of London.
So just north of London.
And this is it's that little bulge on the right side of England. The top of the bulge is Norfolk. And it's this amazing coastline with Broads and wonderful walking and birds. And
I have to tell you, I love the area so much. I mean, it's been a while since I've been to London or anywhere around there into Southport. And just a quick shout out to Pauline Holmes, who is my former sister-in-law. It was her birthday yesterday, and she was partying like crazy with her chickens in just outside of Southport.
There's nothing like a party with chickens.
There's nothing like a party with chickens. And you know, I have to share my life story with you guys because I have to laugh at some of the things that just is. I mean, it's a party with chickens. Yep. I'm just saying. We're in the booth with Claudia Brann from Symmetry Mediation. I must need meditation. Mediation. And we're talking about the importance of having a mediator if you feel that you need it. Just before we left for the break, we had spoken a little bit about some of the difficulties that happen with the older population and older seniors who have family that are making decisions. And I know that this is so much more common because I know through Nanaimo Family Life, we hear of situations every day where the daughters are really exhausted or the sons are really exhausted, and there just doesn't seem to be any way to make a peace for the family. And often they do find themselves working out their triggers through our counseling program, which is fantastic. From a mediation point of view, however, I think it's really critical for people to recognize that mediation isn't about saying you're right and you're wrong. No. It isn't about pointing a finger and finding the blame, or even for that matter, dealing with the shame. And yet all of those components are so much part of the dynamics of that kind of a kind of family conflict. Yeah. So what would you say to that in regards to, dealing with some of the intricacies of shame and blame?
Well, families come together. When they talk about their parents, there's often a commonality. People want the same things for their parents.
Yes.
And we, as older adults, we choose our independence and to be able to receive support when we need it, to be able to speak for ourselves as long as we can.
Yes.
All of those things. And the children are usually supporting the parents in the same way. It's their way of going about it that is often different.
Absolutely.
So it's managing that difference and the different understanding. You know, when you talk about risk in the home, parents, if they're capable, they will decide their own risk. And
Yes.
capacity is to be presumed. Everyone has capacity unless it's proved otherwise. And the only place that can be proved is through an assessment by a psychiatrist and through the courts, all of that. Otherwise, we assume that adults have capacity, and that's really important.
It's so important, because I think that the big piece is that a lot of people that I've worked with that are in this particular situation feel that as the older daughter or older son, that they know what's best for mom and what's best for dad. And that comes back in a huge conflict, because people are allowed to live at risk, and we forget that isn't our decision to make, and yet we make it our decision. And that's really overstepping boundaries.
It's overstepping boundaries, but it comes from a caring place.
Of course, yes.
And that's why talking about it can change it, because if you sit down and talk about the concern you have about your parent tripping at home, or the stove being left on, all the things that we know come sometimes with getting older, that there's a forgetting, there's a sense of imbalance in the body. All those things can happen. But if you talk about them, and if as siblings you all agree that if this happens, nobody's going to be blamed. This is a choice the parent is making to live on their own, to live their life in the way they're choosing. So it's about that, and
we have to be very careful too when we start talking about risks in that regard, that so many older adults are letting their children make the decisions for them, not really understanding that in actual fact, and certainly not everyone, this is not a big blanket out there, but in many cases, people are dealing with abuse of power in the home, abuse of finances in the home. There are abuse of self-care in the home, or care in the home, maybe not self-care, but care in the home, and punishment of the mom and dad if they're not doing what the child wants them to do. And I want to make no mistake here that this is abuse. This kind of behavior is void of, in fact, what is acceptable in any family. Financial abuse and all of these kinds of abuses are harmful. And most parents, not all, many parents, would often say, well, it's not abuse. It's my son. He knows that, he knows my bank card number. He's out getting me a loaf of bread. And while he's getting the loaf of bread, he's getting, this and this and this and this and this. So there are some subtle abuses that go through there, which has sometimes caused conflict within the siblings that are around them, that are watching this, and they become frustrated. So I think, what I wanted to be clear on, and I'm not sure I sounded very clear in that moment, but the idea was to be clear that there's a difference between risks and the family wanting to work together, and families that are being told what to do by their children, and they're taking that freedom of choice away from an otherwise healthy and happy and whole parent who's making some choices that are right for them rather than what are right for their children. And anything really beyond that really needs to be looked at under a much deeper microscope.
Well, you're right. And abuse is something that mediation can help with that.
Yeah.
It can help prevent it, and it can help get family talking about it. So once the family are talking about it and understanding that this is a safe place to talk about it.
Yes.
Make no mistake that a mediator they'll never mediate abuse. And if there is a proven abuse, there won't be, mediation can't take place. And we have a legal obligation to report any previous abuse or any concern about future abuse. However, it's also a way to talk about it, to talk about those subtle levels of bullying or managing people's affairs without them realizing it. It's important to talk about that early on, and families, when they come together, can say, just question, and it's the curiosity that people bring to mediation that's important. So a sibling saying, can you tell me about mother's finances, to the brother? And you can talk about it then as a situation, rather than saying, I'm concerned that you're stealing from mother. It's not that kind of a conversation. It's a conversation where people are learning what's going on. And the mediator can say, this is what I see is happening. Can state it, can name it. And that's really important for families, because between them, they often can't name it.
Absolutely. Excuse me. I've got a little bit of a tickle in my throat today. I spent way too much time at the weekend breathing in fresh air. And now I'm like, holy moly. I'm curious, because when I think about some of the more challenging parts of mediation, there are some families that say, you know what, we can just handle it ourselves, right? We can look after our own backyard. Thank you very much. Having an outside person, Joe is a really good talker. We could get Joe in. Mediation in itself is quite a skill, and you have a level of expertise in your work due to all forms of accreditation, right? So
Yes.
what's the difference? And I guess is what I want to share to the community is what is the difference between having Joe down the road who's a good talker and a professional mediator coming in to really facilitate change in the family dynamic?
Right. Well, the training is around mediation. So general mediation training looks at how you manage a conversation. That's what I talked about, the process of how people all get an equal voice, that there's an unbiased response to what they say, and there's a curiosity about what they've said to go below, to dig deeper than what they're actually stating, to find out, when you say that, when you talk about telling your mother to do something, what kind of a voice do you use when you tell your mother to do something?
Right.
So really talking through what people mean, because we all have our own interpretations of words and how things can be understood. So really getting to the depth of the conversation. Mediators have that training, that ability to do that in a way that is not threatening to people, is a way that gives people an opportunity to really talk from their heart. So Joe may be able to get people to talk, but will they talk equally? Will they have a chance to say what's important to bring to that conversation?
And it's very true that Joe may be a good talker, but you're quite right, because I think what happens in so much conversation is that it's very surface driven. So, I know certainly from counseling perspective, we're taught, if you imagine, for our listeners, imagine the ocean as the top of the service. And let's say, Gabriel Island, because it's right there, and that's a place where you enjoy your much of your life. So you see the top of Gabriel Island, right?
Yeah.
As a sailor, I know that there's shoal and rock.
That's right.
All the way around that island that may go many, many, many feet under the surface. From a visual, I hope that helps our listeners.
Yeah.
Because really, we're when we get to this place, we're at the tip of the iceberg, so to speak.
Yeah.
And there's so many levels of other things that happen within, and not all arguments are like that for some people. Some people have an argument that is, or a conflict that is very much just I can't get to the rudiments of why this is bothering me so much. But it's not all or nothing. It's a situation. For others, it doesn't matter what that other person says. It doesn't matter what they do. It doesn't matter how kind they are. There is this feeling that you're hitting that iceberg and you're hitting it hard. And so your role, I'm assuming, is to be able to, as you said, give the equal time to those persons and to each situation. But how does it start in the sense, I know you told me earlier that it starts by reaching out to some of the people. And they come together, whether they come by Skype or they come into a meeting or whatever. But in the basic foundation of what you're bringing to the table, because everyone has come of their own volition, everyone's decided we want to find a solution, how do you open the discussion in such a way that keeps that balanced? Is there a technique to the way that you've done that? And what might that look like?
And that's very much the process that I talk about. And the process is the same in family mediation and elder mediation. But in elder mediation, you've got a lot more people at the table.
Yes.
Because what we try and do in elder mediation is to bring everyone who may have something to offer as a solution together.
Yes.
So the family members, some of the caregivers, maybe the neighbors, maybe the family doctor, anyone who has a lot of contact or some contact that may be significant with the older adults, they're the people we want there, because we're looking for creative ways to manage this situation. So when they first come together, that's when the process begins.
Yeah.
Is creating a space that's safe,
Yes.
that people feel they can speak, and that's part of the confidentiality I spoke of. Understanding what the confidentiality is for that conversation, and understanding what process people are comfortable with. So if people decide that they want to talk loudly at each other, if they all decide that, that's fine. But it's when people have different ideas of what how the conversation should go, that's when we need to have some maybe called ground rules, or it may be just guidelines for how people would like to relate to each other in the mediation.
And setting that up right off the top means that you can go back if the conversation
That's
goes
right.
awry. You're setting the foundation. You're setting up the
agreement of how they want to relate to each other in the mediation. So the conversation then begins, and everyone has a chance to speak, and everyone has a chance to talk about what they want to change for the better through this conversation today. So we're reframing it in a very positive way right from the beginning. You may want to talk about what you're unhappy about and what's not going right, but eventually we're going to get to what we can change for the better.
yes.
To make this situation different. And that's where the curiosity comes in, that people bring an issue forward, and the curiosity of the mediator and of other parties in the room of how that may contribute to a solution.
So if you have a party of people that have come together, I totally understand that it's probably impossible to give an actual time frame, but let's sort of look at that for someone who is interested in maybe trying out mediation in their
Right.
family. So first of all, there would be the initial consultation, the initial discussion. How long from the point of consultation to the point of creative decision does it take? What's the is there a several hours, several weeks, several months, or is this
Right.
something that can be really handled in I don't know. What's the timeline for a lot of people?
The timeline starts with the initial conversation that I do with families, and that's just a consultation at no cost, that they go away and decide if they want to come back for mediation. Then I will have a conversation with each person that's going to come to mediation. That will be either a telephone conversation or an in-person conversation, but I would only have an in-person conversation if I could do that with everyone, once again to maintain the unbiased sense of everyone having an equal footing when they arrive at the table. So a telephone conversation with everyone, and with the older adult or adults, I would meet them in person. They would be the only people I would make an exception for in meeting in person. They will come to the mediation if they are able. And the accommodations around where the mediation is, if it's in their house or if it's in a place they can come to, the time of day, all of that is around them, their needs.
Right.
So once we've had the initial conversation and then the pre-mediation, which is what the conversation I have with everyone who's coming, which is usually an hour, they will come together, and I will ask everyone to leave 3 hours. And we'll meet for 3 hours.
Wow, that's a good amount of time.
It's a very good amount of time, and the older adults may not find they can stay for all of that time, and so that's why being in their home, they can go and lie down, or being in the nursing home or the care home, wherever they live, it's a place where they can come to and go away from and re-enter when they can. So it's very much an informal process. So the 3 hours is what I would ask everyone to set aside, and they agree to be there for 3 hours. And if that is enough, sometimes that is enough to discuss and come to an agreement that may be an interim agreement, and it may be that then they've decided some pieces that can be put in place, and we can plan to meet again another time for the other pieces that they haven't come to yet.
Absolutely.
But it can be that 3 hours is sufficient. It depends what the issues are.
Absolutely.
And then we would meet for another 3 hours. And it may be that If the family doctor was at the first meeting, he doesn't need to be at the second meeting because everyone feels they know what the situation is there, or the person that comes in as a care worker may not be at the second one. It may be a closer family group.
Absolutely.
I sometimes have the family group sitting at the table, and it's usually a round table that everyone can sit at. So if it's in the home, of course, it's something that we set up however it can be. But I also invite, if the family wants and if it's appropriate, for other people like in-laws and other relatives to come who may be just listening to the conversation, but for them to be there, and when the people go home, they can have also heard what's going on and discuss it with them. It's a support for the child.
And support is really important no matter how you look at it.
Yes.
I mean, it just, whether or not it's two friends that are there just to, hold space for somebody.
Yeah.
These sometimes the situations that come to the table are very, very difficult. They're at times critical.
Yes.
Life-changing for many.
Yeah.
And so it's important that we do that. We're going to take another break in conversation. And since we were having so much fun with that CD that we were listening to a bit earlier, that's Terminal Nostalgia, the singer Ruben Hollebon. See, anybody who knows or watches or follows either this show or Wise Folks on television or the show on Shaw knows that names for me have not been it's not been my strong suit. And really, as I look at my world and think about that, I just, I've got to get a new tongue, but that's okay. Terminal Nostalgia, we're listening to Ruben Hollebon, and the song that we've chosen this time, which I think relates, is Before the Flood.
That sounds good.
And we're back. Oh my goodness, this is such an incredibly wonderful subject. I'm Kathy Holmes. You're listening to Wise Folks. Thanks for tuning in. I'm so glad that you're here. We're grateful that you tune in every Monday at 1 o'clock for this show. The idea behind it, of course, is to share the wisdom of everyone that we can, particularly the wisdom of the elders, and sharing with the elders some of the wisdom that we know that they may be interested in learning. So we're really glad that you joined us. And in the booth with me again, I am so impressed. This woman is amazing. Claudia Brann is with me today, and we've been talking about the importance of mediation. Symmetry mediation has got a very beautiful sound to it just in itself. I love the title, Symmetry. And why did you choose that title?
I think I like the Irish connections with it,
Yes.
sort of the Gaelic, the symmetry of Gaelic symbols. And I like the balance, and I think conflict requires balance.
Absolutely.
It requires balance in talking about it. It requires balance in understanding the different strengths and challenges that people face in conflict. And I feel conflict, my relationship with conflict has changed, I think, over the years and over the studies, in that I used to be afraid of conflict. I used to think conflict was something you moved away from.
Really?
And realizing and understanding how valuable conflict is in our lives, how it can change our relationships, it can change the conversation. So, yeah, I think that's where symmetry comes from.
Well, it's an incredibly wonderful title. I don't like conflict, Claudia. I don't. I would say that when I find myself in conflict, I mean, obviously the typical fight or flight, right? Or freeze is that, what people understand conflict to be. And I'm no different in that. On some issues, it's just so much easier to get up and just walk away. And I've really, over the last few years, learned that walking away, I tell everybody this is, don't shoot yourself in your own foot.
Yeah.
Right. Conflict is about it, unless you're willing to resolve it, it's about shooting yourself in the foot. Because I find that, at least for myself and the people that I love, when I watch what happens when they make crash decisions right off the get-go, they're making choices out of reaction, out of desperation, and instead of just going with it.
Yeah. So often, I think conflict comes out of misunderstandings.
Absolutely.
We presume or we misinterpret, and we go with it. We say, you shut the door on me, it means you wanted me to go.
That's right.
You shut the door
It's
because
over.
it was cold. Yeah.
Yes.
No, there's so many times when you have a conflict, if you stop a moment and you can use curiosity,
Yes.
you can use the kind of term of check it out. Check out, when you say, I'm so-and-so, what do you actually mean?
Yeah.
Really to find out what people mean by certain words, because it can be quite different.
Quite different, and I think that most people don't go to curious; they go to defensive.
Yeah,
Right off the get-go. And I mean, it is actually a skill to be learned, to move from being afraid of the situation and to move into a place of curiosity.
Yeah.
But I also think that it's about, what happens for many people, myself included. I'm certainly guilty of this. You go into mind reading.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's that, okay, well, she said this and she did that, or he did this and he did that, and they did it on purpose because they knew I was really upset about it.
Yeah, this happened to me last week and this has made it worse.
That's right. And how dare you?
They didn't know.
No.
And that's the whole piece of, if we can take a breath when conflict happens and really say, when you say that, what does it mean?
Yes.
Then it can really change it. Check it out. Just think about check it out.
And don't shoot yourself in your own foot.
Yeah, I like Kathy's one, yeah.
Sorry, Claudia. I know. But it's
gun violence.
And no gun violence. I mean it figuratively, not literally.
Yes.
But I do see how some people can become with our practice in animal family life. Certainly with working with some of the older folks through the Better at Home program, I see it a lot. I see it in my own family dynamics and the family dynamics of so many other people.
And I'm not perfect either.
Well, none of us are. I mean,
I have conflict in my life,
I had years ago, I was working on set for something, and there was a really wonderful, Ukrainian woman. Oh, I don't know if she was Ukrainian or not, but she had this very fantastic accent. And she said to me, I was going through lots of trouble. And she said to me, you know, Kathy. She goes, when you have conflict, you have to think like the river. And I said, oh, the river. Oh, Kathy. The river, it's like rapids. It's like you put your feet on stones and it's a little slippery, but because there's so many rapids, you don't know where your feet go. She made me laugh. And she says, and she goes on, when you're in this river, she goes, make no decision for anything. She says,
right.
Make no decisions. You must wait until the river calms.
Okay.
So that you can see your feet.
Oh, right. Very good.
I know. And so it stuck with me. I mean, that was probably, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, but it really, really resonated with me back then.
Yeah.
And this was a woman who was working as a background performer, as I was, in the movie industry. And
Right.
I didn't know her from Adam. I was
Right.
going through all kinds of difficulties. And she was a safe place to fall in that moment.
Yeah.
And I never forgot her message.
Yeah.
So wherever she is, thank you.
So wait for the river to calm.
Wait for things to calm.
Yeah.
And if you can't make it calm, call Claudia, is what I'm saying. How do people reach you, Claudia?
Well, I have a website, Symmetry Mediation. You can Google that.
So what I'm
or my
going to
name.
do is I'm going to stall here for a second, and we're going to tell people it's a really good time. I do this most shows. It's a really good time to go get a pencil. So while you're going to get a pencil, keep your ears open. You are listening to CHLY 101.7 radio. You're listening to Wise Folks. I'm Kathy Holmes, and in the booth with me is Claudia Brann. You need a pencil. Okay, I think I stalled pretty good there. So as we're sort of nearing, you know, we're not at the end of the show yet, but we're nearing this piece. I ask all of our guests the same question. There's wisdom in the things that we're doing. For you, and you can go either direction, personal or professional or both. What's the wisdom behind mediation?
The wisdom for me is that it gives us an opportunity to remove the pain or the troubles that we get into as families.
Yes.
It's a way, and when we look at our aging parents and we look at us as siblings and we think about the troubles that we navigate together,
Yes.
it's worth working them out.
Yes.
Not only for the present, but also for our children. There are so many families where cousins don't talk to each other and they don't really know why.
Oh,
But
so
it's-
many.
And it's something that happened in their family some time ago.
Yeah.
And they don't have a relationship.
Yeah.
It's the present of the time with our elderly parents that we can resolve some of the conflict that we as siblings hold. And it's a way of making the years for our parents easier. They're so distressed by the arguments that can happen between siblings.
And family dynamics are challenging anyway.
Yeah.
For a lot of people. I mean, I can't think of I remember thinking to myself as a kid, oh my gosh, there's got to be a perfect family, right? And you'd look and you'd sort of see this black and white version, right, of Father Knows Best, or, you know, the Partridge Family, or absolutely looking back as an older adult now, total dysfunction, right?
Well,
None
that's
of it
right.
is
Yeah.
true, right? So the family dynamics is important, and family relationships are important. Why? Why are they so important?
They're where we learn so much. They're where we model so much. If we, as older adults, can help our parents to have their independence, their support, what they need in older life, we're modeling something for our children. We can hope that if we do a good job, our children will do a good job with us.
And that's really important.
It is.
It is.
Not in a selfish way, but in a societal way.
Yes. Yes.
If we can manage our old age well, then we give ourselves the sense of freedom.
But isn't that what we want for our kids, right? We want, I mean, I don't know if you have kids yourself,
I do,
you?
yeah.
How many kids do you have?
I have 2.
So, and are they, without going too deep, but their ages, are they?
They're in their 20s.
They're in their 20s,
Yeah.
okay. So, and my son is the same, he's in his 20s.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think back on the generations of, stuff that
Yeah.
went on between. I remember when my grandmother was passing away, my mom and my grandmother didn't always see eye to eye on things, but my mom was very devoted and all of that. But my grandmother on her deathbed said to my mother, "You're not my daughter." Of course, we didn't know in those days that there was dementia, Alzheimer's, and things like that. We had no idea. So my mom went to her grave 5 years after my grandmother died, less than 5 years after my grandmother died. And she was absolutely devastated.
Yeah.
And she carried that forward and forward. And so it's the legacy that we leave behind.
That's
it
right.
doesn't have to be that way.
And that's
it really
what you and I were
doesn't.
talking about in the break, is how the guilt of situations that are not resolved can carry on. Children can be left with things that they can't resolve because the parent has died.
Yes.
And
You can't go back and answer.
No.
Yeah.
And those rifts in families can stay there. And the opportunity we have to talk about them, you within mediation, you never come out worse. You come out knowing. You come out with a better understanding. It's not getting the mediator to understand the situation. It's getting your family to understand the situation.
And I think that that's a really important point, that the purpose behind going to mediation is one that is to sort of say, okay, this isn't, even if some things never change, our perception of those things can.
Yeah.
It really can.
Yeah.
And then we can leave a new legacy for those that are going through it.
And it's not talking about the facts. It's
No.
talking about the emotions that are attached to the facts.
Absolutely. And it's the emotion that drives us, right?
Yeah.
I mean, people, this is my 2 bits on it. People want to feel like they matter.
Yeah.
The instant that someone feels unheard, unvalidated, is the moment that they go, I think, into the I don't matter, and therefore, and I, maybe that's my stuff, I don't know, and maybe I'm assuming a lot, but I think that people do things because that they're intrinsically part of the fabric of who they are. They're intrinsically part of their either helpers or supporters or, whatever it is. And they want to be heard. And when they feel that other people have come along and, really undermined or undervalued or underappreciated or misunderstand or whatever it is, that conflict, that pain translates into sometimes some
Negative
really,
things.
really negative things.
That's right. And mediation gives you an opportunity to be your best self. It gives you an opportunity to admit the pieces that you feel you may not have done as well as you could in a safe environment, and to talk about the things that upset you in other people's behavior.
In all the time that you've been doing this work, I'm going to call you on something. It's going to be hard.
Okay.
And we don't have a lot of time left. So just as a heads up, we've only got a minute or so left. But in the 7 years or several years, but 7 years, I think I heard you say that you were doing mediation with people. What's the one thing for you that just keeps coming up over and over and over again? What seems to be the resolve or the result or whatever it is that just is so clear for you?
It's what we call them as aha moments within mediation, where people suddenly say, "Oh, so that's why you did that," or "That's why you say that." Those aha moments are just magic, and people, their whole body changes in the mediation. They have a sense of being heard, of being understood, of being able to let go of stuff. And if we as individuals are holding on to a resentment, and we can share it with our husbands, our partners, our people in our family, but unless we share it with the people where we're upset, we are never going to get any resolution.
And resolution is a very peaceful, wonderful thing.
It is. It's very
It really
calming.
is. It's very calming. It takes... You can
and
you
it
can
flows
feel
out.
it.
It flows out from us. I think if you, as a parent, are feeling calmer, and then your children feel calmer. And certainly when you're holding unhappiness, we have physical symptoms that come out as well. I think for our mental health and our physical health, being resolved about conflict is very important.
Well, Claudia, our time's up today. I wish it wasn't, but it absolutely is. So what I need you to do, my friend, is remember you guys went out to go get your pencils. Now's the time we get to use them. How does someone reach you, my darling?
Well, they can look for Symmetry Mediation. We also have an Elder Mediation Collective on Vancouver Island. That's eldermediationbc.com. Look on Family Mediation Canada, and you'll find mediators, and you can look for elder mediators or family mediators. There are a lot of mediators out there, and they're doing good work.
Absolutely. Well, you certainly do incredible work. It's been a pleasure to have you with us today. Thanks for listening, everybody, to Wise Folks. We'll talk to you again next Monday. I can't wait to hear.